medicine. Actually is a board examiner for the Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. He's a stellar practitioner of alternative and complementary health and has a clinic in Wimberley with offices also in Austin, where he basically helps people get optimal physical and mental health. Now, I have to tell you a secret, and that is that he put together a really whiz-bang presentation for us, but he ended up saying, but although I'm going to talk about the future of medicine is not medicine, to really get into the futures of all of this, I really have to depend on the group that's here who are futurists, because I'm not a futurist. So he's going to do his presentation. We'll have some Q&A, and then bring on the coffee and pie and like that. And then we'll have another discussion where futurists, us, will get a chance to talk about the implications of what he said, alternative futures, if it's the status quo continued course, or if it's an alternative future like what he's talking about, the future of medicine being other than medicine, or what, we'll have a chance to weigh in. So with that, Dr. Sebring.
We hooked up? Okay. Well, thank you very much for inviting me. I'm not a futurist like y'all are, that's for sure, but I'm very interested in the future. I think most of you will be able to follow what I'm doing, not only because of the intelligence level, but because of the parts of your brain I know that work. The future is understood kind of in the right frontal part of the brain, where you can take large amounts of data and fast forward it and see where it's going. Okay, so most of you who are interested in the future have that capacity. That part of your brain works very well. And that's wonderful for me, because that's where I think. I'm a concept kind of guy. Med school was very difficult for me because it's categorical and sequential. Details, organizational skills, and protocols, you know. Tell me the 27 causes of pain in the left lower quadrant of the abdomen. Shoot me now. Okay, I have to go there in my brain and dig around and to find out what's there, and I can come up with probably 27, maybe a lot more, but that's the way it was taught. So when I got out, I was able to kind of use my concept approach to medicine, and very shortly realized that what I was doing I didn't like. You got a symptom, I got a pill. Next. And that's the way it's practiced. So I started looking around. I liked nutrition before I went to medical school, and that sort of got beat to pieces by the time I got out. Only you, doctor, have the real power to heal. That's what we were taught. So I started going to nutrition conferences, and the first one I went to, I was pretty angry. Those people didn't like what I did. I mean, they're like, doctors, okay, they just thought we were misled. Well, I stuck it out because I'm going to know both. And by the end of the second day, I got it. They were right. I was treating symptoms with a pill, and they were going upstream looking at causation. And it seldom needed a pill. So this was very intriguing, and it allowed me to do something for my patients I was not able to do, which was stop their dependence on me. Teach them how to do this, and then they can do it on their own. And I discovered the American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. We currently have 22,000 members from 105 countries. And almost all of them are MDs, although there's chiropractors and PhDs, etc. And these people really have something to say. My first lecture that I went to was a 4-hour lecture from a 4th-generation endocrinologist from Belgium. His great-grandfather was an endocrinologist. They didn't really have labs to look at. And so as a result, they had to do something very foreign to us, and that is treat people. They had to help this person to get better. They had to be able to diagnose it, the physical diagnosis and history, and then figure out what they needed and treat them. Now you go to an endocrinologist, it doesn't matter what your symptoms are, if your labs are okay, go home, there's nothing to treat. So it's really become very cookbook. Now, the future of medicine is not medicine. That's an arrogant statement by me. That's my assessment of the future. That's what I hope it becomes, and I'm going to do everything I can to see that that's the way it goes. It's not medicine at all. In fact, what I hope to show you here is that the here we go. Whoops. Why do we have disease? If you're on a pristine part of the planet and you peer through the trees into a clearing and you see a wild animal, the last thing you expect is for that wild animal to have some sort of chronic disease. If it did have some chronic disease and you recognize that, it'd be like, I'm out of here. I don't know what the deal is. This is an unhealthy place. I don't know, radiation leak, something going on here, but this is not normal. Yet we fully expect chronic disease to be part of our experience, worsening, increasing, multiplying as we get older, until eventually we succumb from all this chronic disease and we die. And so, where did it come from? Heart disease, for example, virtually unknown in 1900. There was a pathologist that was doing an autopsy on a patient. He saw a heart attack, never seen it before. Never read about it in the literature, never learned about it in school. Spent the rest of his working life looking for more heart attacks. He found 6 more. Cancer. We've done, I don't know how many Egyptian mummies have been examined, but they've only found cancer in 1. In the 1600s, it sort of began growing more over in Europe, and we think it's due to the cold. You know, over in England, the moth changed to from white to black, and now it's black to white, back to white again. But all the coal in the air, that's when sort of the cancer began. In the 1950s, here in America, cancer was not even in one of the top 10 causes of death. So, and yes, we did autopsies randomly on people. It's not like, oh, we didn't know. No, we knew. We have really good statistics on that. And in the last decade, cancer has exceeded heart disease twice as the #1 cause of death. Osteoporosis. Began in human history in about 10,000 years ago in the Middle East when we started growing our own foods. Grains are the cause for osteoporosis, probably the biggest cause. There's 2 reasons for that. Grains hold magnesium in the gut, binds up magnesium, so you have to absorb magnesium first before you can absorb calcium, because the mechanism is a little revolving door that spins back magnesium into the gut and then flips in calcium into the body from the lumen or the internal part of the intestinal tract. The other problem with osteoporosis is acidity. I would say 85% plus of the patients come to my clinic, if you do a urine sample on them, their urine is the pH of that is going to be about 5 or at 5. That's as acidic as the kidneys can handle. You go below 5, you start doing kidney damage. Healthy would be 7, 7.5, be a little more alkaline, eat a lot more greens. So what happens when the pH starts to drop in the kidney, getting close to 5, the body starts having to buffer the urine. What does it buffer it with? Calcium from your bones. So you've got a loss of calcium through the urine. Every time you go to the bathroom, okay, you can have someone standing here with a urine pH of 7, nice, healthy. Give them a big tall glass of milk, they drink that, check a urine pH, 45 minutes later, it's 5. So did that glass of milk help that person replace their calcium? No, it didn't. And it doesn't, in spite of the advertisements. So that's industry. Medicine's run by industry now, in case you don't know. So all the foods we've added in the last 10,000 years, when we started growing our own foods, prior to 10,000 years ago, we were all hunter-gatherers. 5,000 years ago in Europe, you go back 5,000 years ago, basically they were all hunter-gatherers in Europe. In the Middle East, there was a drought. They had to do something to survive. Ended up wiping out all the big game and had to figure out how to survive there. And they ended up growing grains by the riverbanks, and that's kind of where the storybooks end. There's a really good question. Why did they choose grains? I mean, hunter-gatherers consider grains, and I'm talking about wheat, corn, rice, barley, oats, on and on. Why did they choose grains? They chose grains for one reason only. And that reason is, anybody know? Why?
Last through the winter.
Yeah, you can store them. Right, but that brings up another question. Why can you store this food? And the answer is because nothing can live off of it. It's not food for anything on the planet. Nothing on the planet eats grains by choice. It's a backup food at best. Hunter-gatherers consider it starvation food at best, and for very good reason. Grains actually put toxins in their seed so that animals don't eat their seed. If the grain was good food for all the animals, the plants would go extinct. We've learned if you heat them up enough, you get rid of most of the toxins, but not all of them. It's still not food. I'll get into that a little bit more later. But grains, osteoporosis follows the introduction of grains into the diet all around the world. There is one exception of hunter-gatherers that do get osteoporosis. If you thought about it long enough, you might know, figure it out, and that's Eskimos. They don't have any alkalinizing foods, and they really have trouble with osteoporosis. They're sort of marginalized in their area in terms of their resources, etc., but they don't have any alkalinizing foods. Autoimmune disease, rheumatoid arthritis, absent in the archaeologic record prior to the introduction of grains into the diet. Causes inflammation of the gut. And 80 to 90% of your immune system's in the lining of the intestinal tract, and so if you have yeast growing in there because of the grains, and you have gluten coming in there from the grain, it causes an inflammatory state of the intestinal lining, and now undigested foods, undigested proteins will go through that into the bloodstream, and your immune system sees that as an invader. Well, depending upon your genetics, what molecules you have in your body and what's coming through there, and your body making antibodies to what's coming through, it can start attacking parts of your body. The best theory I've read yet on rheumatoid arthritis is there's a bacteria in the gut called Bacteroides. Very common, it's not a pathogen, it's a normal healthy bacteria. But there's a protein on its cell wall that looks just like the protein on the articular cartilage of our joints for some families. Runs in the family for some people. So when one of that protein comes through the lining of the intestinal tract, and the body starts making antibodies to it, and you also happen to have the genetics where you produce that molecule in your articular cartilage, you're going to start attacking your articular cartilage for the rest of your life, and you go to the doctor and your hands swell up and they're all red, and they start to gnarl and be immobile, and we've got all these drugs sort of treat it from that point on, but nobody's looking at cause. So the best way to treat it, what would you do? We take the grains out of the diet, you get good bacteria for the gut, you line it up, you make it as healthy as you can, and you seal off that constant bombardment coming through there, and so you shut down the immune system that's on high alert 24 hours a day because of that leaking gut. And you stop attacking your articular cartilage. Not 100%, but wonderfully decreased. Diabetes. Wow. I don't know where they came up with this, but I was just on the radio the other day, they were talking about they expected diabetes to level off at 42%. Give me a break. I mean, I have no idea. I don't think you can calculate that. It's just growing. It's growing and growing. Until we do something about it, everybody's going to become diabetic. The diabetes is incredibly reversible, and I'm going to teach you how to do that. In fact, there's actually a way to reverse type 1 diabetes so you grow back your own beta cells with a drug called naltrexone. It's basically designed for heroin addicts. You give it in a very small dose at bedtime. It reprograms the T cells, which are our autoimmune cells. You quit attacking the beta cells, and these kids start producing insulin again. But these are all diet related. Now, one of the four major topics I want to talk about today is evolutionary medicine. Evolutionary medicine sort of got its name, and the impetus was developed in the 1990s, so this is pretty new. You know, it provides a very different understanding of our health. You know, I've already told you to a large degree, prior to the introduction of agriculture, a lot of our chronic diseases were absent. You study hunter-gatherers, and I'll show you that a little more later. They're incredibly healthy people. We have a lot of misunderstanding about that. But you can ask the question, when did this begin in human history? Instead of getting out your microscope and looking at the tissue and going, what's going on here, trying to figure out the physiology that's aberrant, and then coming up with a drug to alter that, which is guaranteed to have side effects all over the body. It's going to cost you about $140 to $160 a month, and even more as time goes on until the patent goes out. And then they're going to come up with a newer version of the same thing and prove it to all the doctors it's better still, so they start prescribing that one, and you never get the generics. Okay? So that's modern medicine, but what this does is look at cause. Why do we get this? Think about that wild animal. You study hunter-gatherers. They don't have allergies, asthma, irritable bowel. They don't have those kinds of problems. So it takes into consideration the fact our genes are designed around a hunter-gatherer lifestyle, a lifestyle that makes up 99.75% of our genetic past. Just think about what the genes are expecting. We talk about problems being genetic. They're doing all this genetic research. But the big mistake is we're ignoring our genes completely. See if I can explain something to you. Modern medicine is like this. Oh, you got high cholesterol. Yeah, it runs in your family, doesn't it? Mm-hmm. It's genetic. Here's some Lipitor. Well, that's fixing to go off patent. So now they got them on. Here's some Crestor. Okay. And so, but the average hunter-gatherer cholesterol is 120. We have data on 228 different groups of hunter-gatherers. The average cholesterol is 120. In fact, the entire range between 110 and 140. When you talk about hunter-gatherers, you're talking about people from all around the world. Talk about a disparate group of people genetically. You mentioned hunter-gatherer, and I don't think you could do any greater than that. So, where's the genes? Well, it works like this. If you're living in the Garden of Eden, so to speak, if you're living in that environment from which those genes came, they're evolved, all those genes fit that environment, they wouldn't be there. Occasionally you get a new gene that pops up, but that's the rare exception. So for the vast majority, all those genes fit that environment just fine. They can handle the stresses required in that environment. Now, some families have more reserve capacity than others to handle some of those stresses, but they all have enough. Come out of that environment and get 10, 20, 50, 100 times more stress on some of those metabolic pathways. And some of those families don't have enough reserve capacity to handle that extra stress. Okay? And so this family over here gets depression. This one over here gets heart disease. Right? This one's schizophrenic. Okay? This one becomes diabetic. Okay? And it runs in the family. But again, if you're paying attention to the genes and recognize what those genes are designed for, and then do your best you can to provide your life, design your life in such a way so that you are true to your genes, the genetic problems go away. Does that make sense? So, yeah, we sort of talked about this, but the average hunter, they said the average hunter-gatherer lives to be about 40 years old. Well, that's really not fair because they lived in the 70s, 80s, and 90s, and their functionality is phenomenal even at that age. There's a high infant mortality, and about 34% of the men typically get killed in combat with neighboring tribes. And you're talking about people in their early 20s, late teens, whatever. That really cuts down on life expectancy for the group. But their functionality, and I'll get into that a little bit more later, is phenomenal as they age. Yeah, the modern medical model is you have these symptoms caused by this disease, therefore you get this pill. And even in the research, they're looking to develop a pill. You know, they're looking for a drug. It's just the way they go about it. And causation is just not part of it. And when you understand this idea of evolutionary medicine, that we came from, I'm a romanticist, I admit that, from somewhat of an ideal lifestyle and health experience, then it gives you a very different way. It gives you a whole different set of questions to ask when there's some sort of problem. There's a disease here going on. So, I guess I got ahead of myself and sort of answered all this already. We talked that. But, so these are some hunter-gatherers. Not obviously the bald guy's not. But this is some people down in the Venezuelan jungle. And I want you to look at these people. They're just, are they wretched? Are they shriveling? Are they just barely eking out a living? You know what the average hunter-gatherer workday is? Anybody know?
2.5 hours.
Thank you. 2.5 hours. Exactly right. Early farmer, 10. Today, what, 14, 15? You know, and you do that at work, you do your work, then you go home and you got honeydews and, you know, and you got to do those things. So, yeah, they're very healthy. You know, the women have got incredible muscle mass. They have their feminine shapes, but they have the really good solid mass. They're very strong. These people average at least 1.5 to 3 times stronger than the average American, pound for pound. Okay, so there's some things we're not doing right. And why did we get weak? People, oh, we're the weak one out there. No, we're not weak. We made ourselves weak. We just over-engineered this whole experience. Here's an example. You know, in reality and obviously in evolutionary medicine mindset, what appears to be the cause of the disease is often the body's response to some insult. Now let me talk about cholesterol. You know, I tend to make people mad sometimes, but I'm going to tell you, lowering cholesterol is one of the dumbest things you can do. It's the biggest bogus bunch of nonsense played on the American people. I'll give you a point later on where I think lowering cholesterol makes sense. But cholesterol doesn't cause heart disease. There are things that cause high cholesterol that cause heart disease. Linus Pauling taught us in the 1980s, nobody paid any attention, that heart disease starts as a form of scurvy. It's a vitamin C deficiency. All arteries expand out 100,000 times a day as the heart beats each day. But the ones that are strapped to the heart are on the outside of a very heavy, strong muscle that rings 100,000 times a day. So those arteries, the arterial walls, get tremendous stresses placed on them. And the collagen layer can form cracks. If you had good vitamin C, that crack would heal in 0.2 of a second. Okay? But the only animals that get heart disease like we do are other primates, guinea pigs, and fruit bats. Well, what do they have in common? Well, they're mammals that don't make vitamin C. All the other mammals make their own vitamin C, so it's not a vitamin to them. You've got the average 40-pound dog makes 20 to 30,000 milligrams a day of vitamin C. They've got plenty, more when they're sick. So that crack doesn't heal. And then if you're low on vitamin C, you also produce a little lipoprotein called Lp(a). You all may have heard of that. The doctors are starting to pay attention to it because it's a far superior marker of your risk for heart disease than your cholesterol is. Half the people with heart attacks have normal or low cholesterol. Okay. The people with the very highest cholesterol have 70% less dementia and fewer heart attacks. Okay, the people that have the highest cholesterol live the longest. There's been 5 studies around the world that show that. You can go to nursing homes. There's a study, it's a beautiful study. They went to nursing homes and all they did was check the oldest resident in each home, and you're looking at somebody hovering around 100 years old on average. And so their average cholesterol was 264. Okay, and I know doctors that'll want to put that person on a statin drug. I see it all the time. Why does the body raise cholesterol? It'll raise it because it's a very powerful antioxidant. If you're heavy metal toxic, it'll raise your cholesterol to help protect you from those heavy metals. If you got a lot of pesticides in your body going on, they'll raise that. 80% of your cholesterol is made in your own liver. It's making it mainly not only because it helps to be put into your cell membranes to improve fluidity of that cell membrane, but it's also making it to turn into our hormones: estrogen, progesterone, testosterone, cortisol, on down the line. That's what starts with cholesterol. If you lower cholesterol in a man long enough, you're going to watch his testosterone plummet. He's going to become diabetic, depressed. He's going to muscle wasting, his focus of thinking, and all kinds of other horrible dysfunctions that take place when you lower a man's testosterone. Women need it as well. They need testosterone, they need the DHEA, you need the cortisol for stress. You all probably heard of adrenal fatigue. If you haven't, it's the disease of the 21st century, and that's a low cortisol syndrome. So the cholesterol is also, most of it is actually being made by the liver to turn into bile.
Just
Yes.
adrenal is a low cholesterol syndrome, or did you mean?
I'm sorry, did I say that? Low cortisol.
Thank you. You did mean cortisol. Yeah.
I did mean cortisol.
Yeah, that's what you said.
Adrenal fatigue. Okay. So the majority of the cholesterol made in the liver is made for it so it's going to be turned into bile. Okay? So to emulsify your fats and get the more nutrition out of your food. But the enzymes that convert cholesterol into bile, like they should, get shut off. And you know what shuts them off? Insulin. So what happens is, instead of bile going into the gallbladder, cholesterol goes into the gallbladder, making gallstones, being squeezed and dumped into the intestinal tract, where it's absorbed back into the bloodstream. 80% of your lab value for your cholesterol comes from your own liver, 20% from the diet. That's why the Atkins diet, because it's very low insulin requirements and does not shut down those enzymes that are converting cholesterol into bile. That's why the Atkins diet lowers everybody's cholesterol about 50 points. Even though you start with steak, bacon, eggs, and sausage for breakfast, right? No carbs, so there's very low insulin requirements. So your cholesterol gets turned into bile, and you watch your cholesterol drop, and your good cholesterol goes up. So if you've got heart disease, what do they tell you? Lower your fat, right? Why do they want you to lower your fat? Well, I'm real cynical about this, because they tell you to lower your fat because the American Heart Association, those people sit on the boards of pharmaceutical companies now, and they love for people to lower their fat. Because if you lower your fat, what are you also getting rid of? Your protein, because those two come together. What's left? Carbs. Well, that didn't work too well for lowering your cholesterol. So this is how misinformation gets out there. This is what the dietitians are taught, and that's why none of what we do seems to be working. We're not paying attention to the genes. We're listening to industry. These are some hunter-gatherers that they just discovered down in the Amazon down there, I think, I don't remember which part. From a helicopter, took some pictures. I got these off of Yahoo one day, and there's quite a few. Very impressive. Boy, they're painted up. They're living whatever myths they believe. I don't know if they've ever seen a helicopter before, but they're ready for it. A lot of people think these people, we sort of talked about it, they're eke out a living. Lauren Cordain at Colorado State University wrote an article, Stark Evidence of Periodic Starvation Amongst Hunter-Gatherers. And it shows quite clearly this isn't the case. These people are very healthy. They're masters of their environment. They basically own it. 2.5-hour workday, that gives you an idea of what kind of control they're in. If they want to chop down a tree, they usually go over, grab a few rocks, bank, bank, bank. Pretty soon you got one so sharp you could shave with it. Chop down a little sapling, wrap that around it, tie it off, and chop down the big tree. Clean it, top it, toss their axe, and drag the log back to camp to burn or build or whatever they want to do. And they do that because they can make that axe just about anywhere. Okay? So these people also aged at a much slower rate than what we realize. Hunter-gatherers, there's never been a group of hunter-gatherers that even have a word for arthritis, because they don't get them. their joints don't wear out like ours do, even into their 90s. One of my patients he's been a patient for about 15 years, and I write all kinds of articles, and they're all over the clinic, and I try to put them here and there. And I walked in the room, and he'd been in there, and he said, Dr. Sebring, I never read any of your articles before, but I've been sitting there reading some of your articles, and I got to tell you, see, my wife and I go to Africa about every 2 to 3 years, and we like to stay for like 4 to 6 months at a time, and we like to associate with these hunter-gatherers over in Ethiopia, and those people, they're an absolute testimony what you're talking about. Those people are in their 70s, 80s, and 90s and run around like nothing, and then one day you hear, oh, so-and-so died. Oh, I didn't know they were sick. No, not sick, died. That's the experience. It's just a very different deal. He tried to figure out what they ate. He came with about 90% animal, 55% buffalo, 25% some wild bird like a chicken, 10% goat, about 10% vegetables and fruits. Okay. Now, I don't think the ratios are that important, but that's all live food, very rich live food. When we started eating meat, brain size doubled. Okay. When we added grains to the diet, we lost 6 to 7 inches in height all around the world. It's an archaeologic fact. We lost brain size. Okay? The sphenoid bone here that buttresses the sides of the skull and supports the brain back through here was no longer strong enough to span that original distance. So the body narrowed it. So it would narrowed faces, smaller brains, a nose you can't hardly breathe out of, and a jaw that no longer can hold all of our teeth. So you get crooked teeth, and everybody needs their wisdom teeth taken out. You ever wonder why that is? Now you know. So, yeah, we have to assess their age differently because they didn't wear out like we do, the joints. And if you're looking at the, sorry.
I know, I'm fine.
Okay. Yeah, so let's go to the next. These are kind of fun. It's not lengthy, but Captain Cook, y'all know him, discovered Australia and this all around, and wrote of the Morai in New Zealand in 1772. It cannot be thought strange as these people enjoy perfect and uninterrupted health. In all our visits to their towns, among young and old, men and women, come crowded about us, prompted by the same curiosity that carried us to look at them. We never saw a single person who appeared to have any bodily complaint, nor among the numbers that we have seen naked did we perceive the slightest eruption upon the skin, or any marks that eruption had been left behind. A further proof that human nature is here untainted with disease is a great number of old men that we saw, appeared to be very ancient, yet none of them were decrepit, and though not equal to the young and muscular strength, were not a whit behind them in cheerfulness and vivacity. Now, if you're a romanticist, you gotta love that. That's just wonderful. It tells you where to go. If you want to be healthy, it kind of gives you a picture now of where we need to go. We need to learn what these people did and if what we're doing that caused this. This is some more hunter-gatherers. They don't look weak. They look pretty solid. And I think he's probably trying to look mean right now. I don't know. But just want to give you some examples here. This is also good. The French explorer Rene Ledonnier in his exploration of Florida in 1564 noted, "The agility of the women is so great they can swim over great rivers, bearing their children upon one of their arms. They climb up also very nimbly upon the highest trees in the country. Even the most ancient women of the country dance with the others." They don't have this downhill decline, okay? They have this functionality curve that is much more square. Boom. Okay? By the time you're 30, you realize you don't heal as fast as you used to. Wow, that scab should have been gone a long time ago, but it's still here. And you sort of project that on out through time, and you go, pretty soon I'm subterranean out there. And that's not, we all know about the 96-year-old man somebody found dead in the garden one day, and he fixed his own breakfast that morning. You know, there are these people that maintain their functionality. We all know them. This George Catlin in the 1830s describes the Crow tribe, an American Indian tribe. They're really a handsome and well-formed set of men as can be seen in any part of the world. There's a sort of ease and grace added to their dignity of manners, which gives them the air of gentlemen at work at once. I observed the other day that most of them were over 6 feet high. It is but to paint a vast country of green fields, where the men are all red, where meat is the staff of life. Okay? So if you eat meat, it needs to be free range. Okay? It's what we do to them. It's not the cow or the steer or the bull. It's what we do to them. So we've sort of gone over this first part here. Follow the lifestyle. The genes are expected, and disease does not happen. Okay? Consider a wild animal in a pristine part of the planet. If you shoot an old tiger, and you go over there and open its mouth, teeth may be worn, but it's going to be clean, pristine, very functional. Probably not missing any unless they broke them on something. These people look really sick, don't they? They also got a lot of vitamin D, which I encourage everybody to take. I usually recommend patients 5,000 international units a day, every day, except during flu season. Then you double it to 10, and it's far superior to the flu shot. I'm sure somebody would like to shut me down for saying that, but the research is out there. Just 10,000 a day. Finland gave everyone in their country 10,000 international units a day for over 20 years. It virtually eliminated osteoporosis, reduced cancer, depression, allergies, and chronic infections. The paleo diet. That's what I've been talking about here a little bit, and that's the diet that hunter-gatherers eat. That's what Lauren Cordain, part of his research, has done. What do hunter-gatherers eat? What is this diet our genes are expecting? And we cause genetic diseases by not following that diet. Well, the average hunter-gatherer gets 70% of their calories from animal. That's average. Of course, you go to the poles, it's 100%. You go to the equator, it's about 55%. There were a couple of tribes that were discovered that had an average of 45% animal. There were 2. That's the least amount ever found in any hunter-gatherer group, and is a lot more than what we typically get. Now, this is not protein, 40% protein. This is 40% animal. That is usually a very lean animal in most cases. The rest is fruits, nuts, vegetables, berries. No grains, no beans, no potatoes, no dairy. Dairy is baby food, period. It's designed for a baby. 99% of white people are allergic to dairy. 100% of blacks and Hispanics are. Okay? You get a histamine release from it, so sometimes it wakes you up a little bit. The bacteria in the gut take the casein, the major protein that's in dairy, and turns it into something called a casomorphone. It has a morphine-like effect on the body. Well, that's a wonderful thing to happen if you're a mom and you're nursing your baby and you want it to go to sleep. Because then they get this morphine effect and they kind of look drugged, you know. So that works very well, but it's not good for adults. We're all looking for a state of calm alertness. Calm and alert. Yeah, that sounds good. Okay. Well, the milk can do that for you. But with the histamine release and stimulating you in the casomorphine-like effect, but it causes a chronic inflammatory state of the gut. It promotes viral replication, and you end up with the morphine-like effect, which you don't really want if you want to be alert. So, let me just say that if you had a bowl here, let me just illustrate this diet a little bit better. If you had a bowl here of chopped up raw beans, chopped up raw grains, chopped up raw potatoes, right? That wouldn't look like food. It wouldn't smell like food. It wouldn't taste like food. And if you ate enough of it, it'd kill you. That's not food, okay? Now, vegetables, fruits, and berries, they're calling you with their bright colors, going, hey, look at me, look at me. And when they're the most bright, they're the most nutritious. They're even scented, pretty compelling. And then we eat them, animals eat them, and then 10 miles down the road start depositing their seeds in piles of fertilizer. that's the propagation strategy of those plants. That's why they spend so much energy to produce that fruit for us. Okay, so there's a coevolution that's been going on. The plants learn to feed the animals learn to live off the plants. In times of drought, then the plants will actually produce extra products in their fruit or vegetable that allows the animals to deal with the stress of that drought. Because they don't want those animals dying out. If they die out, this plant's spending way too much energy on its seeds that aren't going to get scattered and used. They were better off having something that the wind blew around and took a chance on using big numbers of seed. Okay? So these wild berry juices that you read about, the acai and the noni juice and the goji juice and the mangosteen and all these wild berry juices, they work. If they truly are wild, they actually have products that go straight to our DNA and turn on and turn off big banks of regulatory genes. I've seen them work miracles with patients. I mean, blood sugars just dropped down to almost normal. The guy that drinks 4 or 5 Cokes a day, he's diabetic. He's not going to change, but he drinks his berry juice. And he went from a hemoglobin A1C of about 11.2 to 7.2 just by drinking this. That's a big change, by the way. Rheumatoid arthritis, another one. Sleeping problems, another one. You just see it. But the paleo diet can actually reverse these chronic diseases. You can get rid of diabetes on this paleo diet in most adults in about somewhere between 3 weeks and 4 to 5 months. Just follow this diet. It works. People feel better immediately. Helps prevent chronic disease, and you need to eliminate the disease-causing foods. There's 2 parts to this. Very nutrient-dense foods, the animal protein, the vegetables, the fruits and the nuts and the berries. Those are very nutrient-dense. If you're eating nutrient-depleted foods like breads and potatoes and the pasta and the beans, then you have to keep eating to get what you have to have. So the calorie intake skyrockets. Not only that, those plants have toxins in them that bind up our digestive enzymes. So you can't even get the full nutritional benefit from the more nutrient-dense foods that you may have also eaten. So we're starving. You got to keep eating. You don't get satiety. I always recommend start your day with a 14-ounce buffalo steak hot off the grill. Guaranteed to get you through the morning. Now, if you really want to be smart, have a bunch of little spinach or something to go with it to get a little alkalinization. But that's the way to start your day. Try it someday. Leftovers is also extremely easy, and that's what hunter-gatherers often do. So now, see, that looks good. That looks good. You know, kids sometimes don't even recognize that these days. You ever heard of these food deserts where people live in the inner city and there's no food for miles? You know, there's no grocery store, there's nothing. It's all fast food, whatever. That hurts me. Now, see, I think that looks really good. Even though we've eaten, that looks good. All right? So this is the kind of thing that humans are designed to eat. Just for fun.
I love it.
I put this in it. You know. So if you don't eat nutrient-dense foods and you eat those others, you got to keep eating. Your body will do it. It's the reptilian brain takes over. It's not a will thing. I've seen it. Now this is kind of interesting. Paleo diet and orgasmic birth. This is something that just sort of blew me away. I had 6 women in my practice that had done paleo diet during their pregnancies. They did incredibly well. 5 of them had had babies before, and they sort of came in and said that was a very different experience. That whole delivery was very different. A couple of them told me, and a third one did later, Dr. Sebring, I don't believe what happened. I had an orgasm pushing that baby out. Now, I've been a fan, and one said she had 7 or 8 with contractions. And I've been a fan of this diet for many years at this point, but this was a little much. I didn't know what to make of it. And why am I hearing this? Why didn't somebody else know about this? Somebody's got to know somewhere. I'm looking for support. The only thing I came up with is, at the time was, okay, you get kicked out of the Garden of Eden, whatever that means, You're no longer a hunter-gatherer anymore. From the sweat of thy brow thou shalt earn thy bread. Okay, your workday went from 2.5 hours to 10. You're eating bread now, and we're going to multiply pain in childbirth. Oh, it didn't used to be that bad. Okay, that was all I could come up with. And then the compounding pharmacists, they started talking about this new trick they had using oxytocin. Oxytocin they would put sublingually under the tongue, let that dissolve. If you have sex in the next hour, it increases dramatically the intensity and duration of orgasm. Well, that sounds like fun, but the interesting thing to me was oxytocin is what the pituitary puts out in huge pulsations during labor and delivery that causes the uterus to contract. That dual activity of oxytocin is not an accident. If a woman is having orgasms with her contractions, all those endorphins are blocking down the pain. They're going to the baby. How beautiful is this? We just over-engineered this. So apparently you need to have your body in tune with the paleo diet and lots of omega-3s, and they're stronger, their pain sensitivity really drops. And one of the Earth Mothers that was at, I call it that, but she was sort of a massage therapist and at a nutrition conference that we have here about every other month, functional medicine conference. And so I just tossed this out there to the several I was talking to at the time to see what would happen. And this one gal says, well, delivery is supposed to be orgasmic. And I said, say that again. And she did. And I said, well, why? And she says, well, because it is. And I think she sensed my frustration with that answer. And she said, well, I think there's a book written on this called Orgasmic Birth. So I'm on the internet as soon as I can get there. Type that in. Well, there's just tons of stuff on it. 2020 did a deal on it, and they interviewed Christine Northrup about it. There's documentaries on it. And you just see these women, it's usually in warm water, and ideally their husband is sort of behind them, holding them, kissing them on the neck, and just sort of getting this whole mood and their experience of the contraction. You watch it, it's different, okay? There's no screaming and thrashing around. It's a very different experience. So, yeah, that's real. And I just think the paleo really helps to set the stage for that. It gets the physiology more appropriate. We talk about reversing diabetes, heart disease. I clean out coronary arteries in my clinic, like to do a calcium score. One of the things that's very key and very important for the cleaning that out is to get on the paleo diet. I've seen that do it by itself. Check a CAT scan again a year later, and their calcium scores have dropped quite dramatically. You can clean that stuff out. I know the cardiologists, the bypass surgeons don't like me to say that, but you can. Autoimmune disease, you stop the leaking of the gut. My basic formula for every patient that walks in the door is paleo diet, omega-3s, and good bacteria for the gut. And then in the last few years I've added in vitamin D, because we always aren't getting enough of that. Cancer. All cancers, listen to this, if you don't know it, I want you to hear it. All cancers are obligate glucose eaters. They have to have sugar. Go to any oncologist office, you'll find donuts, they're encouraging milkshakes, they're doing all this stuff. And what they'll tell you is, oh, if you're losing weight, you're losing the battle. Well, that's how they get you. I don't think they know what they're doing. I think somebody knows. I don't think they know what they're doing. Paleo diet is a very low glycemic diet, right? So we try to keep the fruits at a minimum because the fruits have a tremendous more sugar than they originally did. But it's mainly animal and vegetables. So it really handicaps the cancer, and the body can go after it. It supercharges the immune system, and it really works wonderfully well. Fatigue and depression, those typically go away. How am I doing on time?
Keep going.
Okay. Well, I just wanted to show you, this was my latest grandson, 4 days old, 9 pounds, 9 ounces, for a paleo mom. And he's 3 months old and 19 pounds. So my daughter will pump the milk once in a while, and so that her mom can, because she's my nutritionist also. She works at my nutrition store. And you know, you look in the refrigerator where she's got these bottles of milk and it's half fat. I mean, it's just, it is rich. But she eats paleo. Now this is interesting because this didn't reproduce very well, but obviously you can see it's a graph. This was a guy that 62 years old, came to my clinic, thought he was pretty healthy, and we checked the blood sugar on him. It came back pretty high, but his hemoglobin A1C, his blood sugar came back 404. Okay, that's high. We like it under 100. He didn't know he was diabetic, like I said, and his hemoglobin A1C was 11.2. Okay, that's up there. So I call him up to tell him, and he's mad. This guy is, I don't want to take any drugs. I certainly don't want to take, can I beat this with diet and exercise? This guy's an accountant, right? So, perfect. They think categorically, all right? Okay, let me tell you the good foods. I said, you got the paleo diet book at home and you haven't even read it. You think you're doing it, but you're not. You're drinking that General Foods coffee all day long, and tell you the truth, I don't even think that's coffee. Okay? So get the book, read it, follow it, call me with any questions, and get you a little exercise program. Doesn't have to be huge, but something you think you can do and sustain. So being an accountant, he marked off exactly 1 mile. So he rides his bike 1 mile, halfway there, you know. And so eventually upped it to 2 because he really enjoyed that. But these are his subsequent sugars. This one I think is a 383. This one he started checking them. That's that's 3 sugars for the day average. The first one's fasting, 2 are not. The next day, 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 and on. Now, his heartburn went away here. And I'll tell you how that works, but we don't have quite enough time for that. But he was sleeping in the chair for 3 years. Day 5, he calls up and he said, I've got so much energy. I haven't had this kind of energy in 20, 25 years. Does the diet do this? Can it work this fast? I said, you know what? I hear this all day long. You're doing great. Keep going. Day 21, his blood pressure was averaging 105 over 60, 65. It had been in the 140s over the 90s. Okay? So he says, I'm always in a good mood now. You know, and that translates to being more effective at work. And I used to look at food as a reward. I don't. I look at it as nourishment for my happy mind and body. My reward is enjoying life more. You know, when I was in Las Vegas several years ago, at an anti-aging conference, I saw this billboard and I misremembered it. I grabbed one of the little pamphlets that was there, and I was on the plane. I was trying to remember what it said. And I thought it said, insufficient reward syndrome. And I thought, well, that's 85% of America, right? So food helps us to kind of supplement that. We're not getting enough reward. We need reward. You know, I think that's why people turn to recreational drugs sometimes, just because they want something. Nothing's coming in. You work this hard and don't get much back. The actual article was on reward deficiency syndrome, which means that certain people's level of satiety and pleasure center didn't light up as much as others. But insufficient reward syndrome, I think I'll do a paper on that someday. So these are the things that the evolutionary medicine, these are some of the new things that we deal with in our society. The hunter-gatherers, they can get tooth decay. We have some evidence of that, but it's quite rare. But this is what we deal with, and we can find no evidence in hunter-gatherers. Postpartum depression, that's an omega-3 deficiency, probably more than anything else. You take high-dose omega-3s during your pregnancy, and you virtually eliminate postpartum depression, and your baby has a considerably higher IQ, if you look that up, and it's permanent. Now this is an elephant drawn by my 6-year-old grandson. He said he drew it at sunset. And I'm pretty proud of that. His mother has been paleo for many years. But I think that's pretty good for a 6-year-old drawing an elephant. So, I'm bragging. Now this is another concept here. Okay, this is called organ reserve. organ reserve talks about the fact that we start with a lot more organ capacity than we need to handle our daily requirements. Okay? You only need 20% of the kidney capacity you start with to handle your daily needs. Okay? 80 to 90% of the substantia nigra, the part of the brain involved with Parkinson's, is gone before there's any sign of a tremor. So as we lose total capacity, there's no loss in functionality. You see how this system works? Until you get down to whatever it is, 20%, 10% left, uh-oh, we got a problem. Now, it makes no sense to have one system, neurologic system, for example, good for 200 years, and a cardiovascular system good for 65. Because as soon as you run out of one, you're done. So if you're living in that environment from which all those systems grew, you should hit the wall with all your systems at the same time. Does that make sense? And then like a house of cards, they just all fall because this one starts to fail, and this one doesn't have much reserve capacity at all, and boom, 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 it all tumbles and you're done. And that's what my patient was talking about when he was talking, oh, I didn't know they were sick. No, not sick, die. Okay? They have functionality, and I like to think of it as anti-aging because that's how I kind of got started in this, but you don't age. You maintain functionality. Yeah, your skin gets wrinkles and all this kind of stuff. The sun's going to do that. But your functionality remains the same. And that's really what we're all looking for. Boom, done. My grandfather died at 97, sitting in the chair. My sister was a home health nurse. And they were still independent, married for 76 years. And stopped off with, Granddad, how you doing? He said, well, to tell you the truth, I've been feeling kind of poorly today. And she said he finished the sentence and his head fell over. And we think what happened was aortic aneurysm ruptured, so he had 0 blood pressure, and it's a great way to go, actually. This is just organ reserve theory is a way to stop aging as we think of it. Just be kind to those systems so that you're not insulting them along the way. Treat them, give them what they're expecting. That way we maintain the functionality at 100% until we die. It's a much more friendly way to think about aging and life on this planet. You know, we get mad at all these aches and pains. You see the bumper sticker, you know, old age isn't for sissies. You know, and it's tough stuff these folks are dealing with. Now, let me just ask you this. If you are, let's say you're 76 and somebody is saying, you know, maybe we ought to go in there and do this, or you got a bad back or something, and you can treat it, but somebody wants to do surgery on you, that's going to suck out some of your organ reserve, I guarantee you. That's a big, expensive procedure on your body. So if you think about the concept of organ reserve, when you quantify this decision, if you think about that, then there's a total different factor here that you may want to consider. Okay? It's just a thought. Orthomolecular medicine is just using our own chemistry to treat us. I do lots of bioidentical hormones in people. I use alpha-lipoic acid. I use digestive enzymes. A fella came to me with metastatic melanoma. He had 14 tumors all over, great big. His oncologist said, I can't help you anymore. You need to get hospice. You probably got about 2 weeks. So he comes to me and he says, anything you can do? And I said, well, how much time do you say you had? And so I said, well, yeah, maybe I can help you. So I put him on IV vitamin C. We got him up to 70,000 milligrams IV twice a week. I also put him on digestive enzymes, proteases, digest protein. 22 little tablets, 5 times a day, including once in the middle of the night. They're little. One of my patients, we're getting rid of her metastatic breast cancer the same way. She says, Dr. Sebring, I can swallow 22 tablets in one gulp. Okay. So 3 weeks later, he felt better than he'd felt in 15 years. 6 months later, his tumors are 1/4 the size they were before. That oncologist actually came to visit me. He said, what the heck did you do? What are you doing? Because he was doing the CT PET scans monitoring him. I said, sit down, doc, we got a lot to talk about. He just said, we're taught in such a narrow paradigm. We're waiting for the next protocol to be approved by the FDA. That's it. I call it puppetization. It's an unfortunate, it's a little condescending, but people get lazy. They're riding the wave. It's working well for them. They don't want to learn a better way. Once when I went to that nutrition conference, I couldn't do it any other way. It would have been dishonest. You can treat adrenal fatigue with your own chemistry, minerals, vitamin C, potassium. I do a little herbal stuff too. I don't do a lot of herbs, but they're very wonderful in some areas. And the good news, it's almost always curative. You rebalance the system, get it working like it was. There was a perturbation in there. Something got overstressed, whatever. And you get that back. The body wants to heal. I want you to keep that in mind tremendously. The body wants to heal. And you stop insulting it with these foods, and you give the cells the nutrition they need to perform the function they can perform. Until you've run out of organ reserve, and there's some ways we can help that, but until you run out of organ reserve, the chance for cure is really good. Okay? But these are some of the things we can treat: hypertension, depression, addictions. Let me tell you about this one. This is fascinating. Guy comes to me and he says, Doc, he said, can you do that IV amino acid therapy here? I need somebody who knows how to do that. If you know how to do that, can you learn how to do that? And I said, well, I've heard about it, but I don't know how to do it. Excuse me. I said, I can probably learn how to do this. He said, I did it 6.5 years ago. I quit drinking for 6 years. I'm starting to drink again. It's affected my business. So I looked into this, and he told me where he got it done, over in Durango, Colorado. It turns out there was a Dr. William Hitt down in San Antonio who developed this IV therapy. And in this IV were amino acids. And each of those amino acids in one step was turned into a neurotransmitter in the brain. So you got an IV every day for 10 days. So it was about a 4-hour run-in time for this IV. And what's interesting, they treated alcohol, cocaine, Valium, Vicodin, food, sexual, the addictions. It didn't matter. What was interesting was 5 years later, 80% of those people still don't have the problem. There is nothing like that, not even close, for addictions. It's like top off all your neurotransmitter tanks. Okay, back off. Let the DNA take over. Okay? Or, modern terms, reboot. Okay? And so these, the body wants to heal. Usually what happens in a lot of these things is, something in the body, this goes high, which causes this to go low, which causes that to go high. It's like a dieseling engine, if you know what that is. So that's, the hormonal deficiencies is kind of my specialty too. That's a lot of fun. I use a lot of detoxification to get rid of the toxic load of the body. We have so many toxins these days. There it is. This is just a break. I have a lake that leaks, and then when it's full, it's really fun to get. It's about a 4.5 foot tall waterfall. You can go get under that, and, play Robinson Crusoe or whatever, Tarzan. Have y'all ever seen that video? It's 1934. If you like this kind of stuff at all, to me, this was pivotal in my life, I think, in understanding what life should be. But in 1934, there's a Tarzan movie where Tarzan and Jane, and they walk out on this limb of this big tree that's overhanging their swimming pool that they always was swimming. And he shoves her off. And she's got this evening dress on. I don't even remember what the situation before. Some twig catches her evening dress and just rips it off of her. She goes in the water stark naked. And they swim around out there. And she's on his back underwater. And of course, that's Johnny Weissmuller. He can really swim. And then she drops back and holds on to his ankles. And he does this kind of loop around like this and up, And they go up and get air and go back down again. And I thought, that's the way life should be. I just thought that's But if you Google Tarzan and Jane naked 1934, you'll find it. And it's really worth looking at. The other part of this is anti-aging medicine. That's American Academy of Anti-Aging Medicine. It really started in the early 90s with a bunch of guys that were that had a lot of knowledge, and just said, we're not using the technology we've got. You know, modern medicine isn't really kind of letting us do that. They don't like us doing this stuff. And we know a lot more. We don't have time for the FDA to approve it, but it's safe, and here's all the research to do it. They're not ever going to approve it because it's not a pharmaceutical drug, so it's just not going to happen. The incentives aren't there. I don't know if you know or not, but 94% of the employees at the FDA says it's crooked, it's ruined, it needs to be torn down and gotten rid of. Former directors said it's incapable of protecting us from another Vioxx. Obama got a letter 2 days after he was elected that said, we want you to know that our managers, the researchers wrote this, our managers are changing the wording of our research and approving products we've disapproved. Marcia Angell, former editor-in-chief of the New England Journal of Medicine, says the pharmaceutical industry owns the medical journals. Nothing gets published except what they approve. The former editor-in-chief of the British Medical Journal says the medical journals exist for one purpose and one purpose only, and that's an advertising arm of the pharmaceutical industry. A fellow came into my clinic about 10, 11 years ago and horrible congestive heart failure. His heart was 2/3 the width of his chest. He had a 10% ejection fraction that's not compatible with life, should be 60, 65%. They asked me if anything I could do, well, first I sent him to the cardiologist who said, get, short of breath, chest pain, call 911, come to the hospital, whatever. I got to tell you, there's not much I can do for you. So they came back, is there anything you can do? And I said, well, maybe. I read of a couple of French studies that talked about growth hormone as being a possible future use in congestive heart failure. And I said, I don't think it'll hurt. And they went, no, it can't hurt. So we put him on that, and around about $300 a month. It's just a little tiny injection of his own chemistry, orthomolecular medicine. One of the safest things you could possibly do is use growth hormone, in spite of all the propaganda. It'll reverse even people on dialysis. They get off dialysis and use growth hormone. But you find sham studies out there, I won't get into that say it won't do it. And if you know anything about growth hormone, that's the most ridiculous study you'll ever read. So I put him on growth hormone, and 6 weeks later he's out chopping cedar. Life expectancy for a 10% ejection fraction is about 1 month. And his ejection fraction went from 10 to 35 to 40%. So I was telling another cardiologist that comes to my clinic, he's since retired, about this. And I told him what was done, and he looked at me and he said, we really don't see that in our literature. I fell over. I thought to myself, your literature? What do you mean your literature? The world's my literature. What do you mean your literature? And I realized that doctors just read their journals. That's it. So they're so captivated. I had a patient with squamous cell cancer of the neck, and long story short, I wasn't willing to treat the alternative because we couldn't find the primary. I don't have anything to monitor. And modern medicine has a pretty good cure rate with this. It's horrible, high-dose radiation, high-dose chemo, followed by complete neck dissection, but a good cure rate. And I said, but you can do IV vitamin C. That'll protect your healthy cells from collateral damage from radiation and the chemo, and it'll make the cancer cells much more susceptible to being killed by the radiation and the chemo. So he gave it to his oncologist, and she hit the ceiling. No way. It's going to protect the cancer cells. What do I do, Doc? I said, give her these 2 studies and have her talk to Dr. Driscoll at the University of Kansas. So, much to his surprise, she called Dr. Driscoll, talked to one of Dr. Driscoll's PhD researchers for 45 minutes, came back inspired, got it, made sense, okay? So, it's not that they don't want to believe this stuff, I think they're really corralled. They're amazingly blinded and kept that way. But it's, so it's basically applying Olympic athlete medicine to the individual, and it's just grown and grown and grown. And it's so inspiring to go to these conferences because these are the best people in the world. I mean, they really are. A 4th-generation endocrinologist, from Belgium, and Olympic trainers that with great success. I saw plastic surgery by this Japanese plastic surgeon that make you want to cry. It was amazing what he could do for people, and it's just another method. It does detoxification, and that's where I learned the bioidentical hormones. Sort of got me started. But it's all real science. Bioidentical hormones, I say, after the paleo diet's the most bang for the buck. You guys out there, you can look across around the room and see who's low on testosterone. Pale, big bellies, and some other people that are working hard not to be that way, but are also low on testosterone. It's a safe form of orthomolecular medicine. The Women's Health Initiative was a scam to get women off of it. The women that used Premarin only had 22% less breast cancer than the women that didn't use any hormones at all. So when they added in the synthetic progesterone, there's a 34% increase. Their conclusion was hormones are bad. The real reason for this study was to get women off their hormones as fast as they can, because the drug companies didn't have anything new coming down. All they had was the Fosamax and the Boniva and the Actonel for the bone density. Well, you got to get women off their estrogen first, or they don't need those drugs. Now we know those drugs have a black box warning, cause femoral fractures. And if you understood how it worked and anybody bothered to read it, you go, that's going to cause fractures down the road. So I think that's about it. Gut flora, digestive enzymes, IV nutrition, vitamin C, alpha-lipoic acid, CoQ10, cardiac vitamins. These are some things we can put in neurotransmitter precursors. I do a lot of this in my clinic. I hope other doctors start taking it up because it's an incredible way to treat people. And this is my mom. I don't know. She's 87 and does pretty well. Exercised all her life. Primal fitness. I'd be killed if I didn't put this in here by Ken. He's an amazing guy, but he's really into the exercise, known really around the world. Builds muscle. Number one predictor of life expectancy in the nursing home is muscle mass. Changes your entire physiology. A long-going debate between a man who was the strongest man in the world at one time, Terry Todd, teaches at the University of Texas, and Ken Cooper, the Cooper Clinic in Dallas, 1968, wrote a book called Aerobics. They argued back and forth for many years. What's the best way of measuring the health of a cell? Todd said strength. He said endurance. Now Ken Cooper says, you're right. It's strength. The aerobics didn't accomplish what we hoped to accomplish. Resistance exercise and nutritional supplements, that works. It's the best way in the world to maintain brain fitness. It works better than any drug for Alzheimer's or anything else you can do. It's great for diabetics, increased metabolism, and it helps you detoxify it. You sweat it out. And lactic acid, by the way, is a very wonderful chelator for heavy metals. So the more lactic acid you produce, the more chelation you're going to do. Now this is my buddy. We've been friends since, he's funny, since 5th grade. And I've been trying to get him on paleo diet. Now he's 57 years old, and he works out a little bit. Doesn't take any drugs or anything, but he looks pretty formidable. But he is a paleo diet fanatic, okay? So that's what you can do. He feels terrific. So the medicine, here's future, okay? Medicine of the future, evolutionary medicine, the paleo diet, organ reserve, orthomolecular medicine, and anti-aging medicine. These are the concepts that I think you should take with you, apply them, listen to what your doctor is suggesting that you do, and weigh it against what you know here. Okay? Is there a better way? And if you look around, you'll find a better way in almost all instances. I think the medicine of the future will dramatically reduce disease if we do it this way, if we pay attention. We keep looking for drugs, whatever, listening to the government, listen to the doctors, you're not going to get there. There's no side effects from these treatments. Maintain functionality much more fully until death. That's what we really want. Cost is greatly reduced. Morbidity is markedly reduced. People are much more in control of their own health. Yay. You know, I really think with the right program, you can shut down 70% of modern medicine. Keep the ERs open, you know, and that's about it. EMS, that's really good. Reduce confusion about what is appropriate for one's health. So you use these paradigms, you got something to weigh it against. Should you give a statin drug to a 93-year-old, right? And more freedom to choose your modality. Okay, this is a picture of my clinic in Wimberley. It's on 15 acres, and a little winding road to get to it. It's a lot of fun. And that's it.
think now, for the first time, I understand why when you phone his cell phone and you don't get him and you get the phone mail, what you hear is, run, 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 run. Now I know why. So let's get our coffee and pie and come back and we'll have some Q&A and then some good futures talk.
Yes.
Thank you very much.
So just one comment. The chocolate pie we have up here is German chocolate, and people need to know that it contains nuts and coconut.
Thank you.
They may come see me with questions and I teach them and they go home. But I just don't, I think the hospitalizations are going to be a whole lot less. I think, first of all, if they know what I know, the last place they want to go is the hospital, you know. So the reluctancy is not their first choice, it's like their fifth choice. But I'm glad we've got hospitals. I'm an MD, I'm glad they're there as a backup. So I think you have a lot less hospitalization, a lot less morbidity, meaning the accumulation of more and more disease at a worse and worse rate. Somebody becomes diabetic, they get inspired to get healthy. I forget who said it, might have been Osler, but that said the secret to a long, healthy life is to have a chronic disease and take good care of it. Okay?
However, what you're citing is still anecdotal evidence. My question goes to developing statistics.
Well, I have a plan to do that. I have a plan to develop statistics on millions of people if it goes through, and I think it will.
So what kind of vitamins and supplements do you recommend?
What I mentioned earlier was everybody comes to my clinic, I recommend omega-3 fish oil, usually about 2,000 milligrams a day of actual EPA and DHA. You need to get the triglyceride form and not the ethyl ester form because it's 4 times better absorbed and there's no toxicity. So it's more expensive, but it's far better for you. A very good probiotic, okay? A really good acidophilus.
Could you say what a good probiotic is? Because there are several.
Well, there's one called VSL3, which is 4.5 billion colony-forming units in a little packet. It's kind of expensive, so I save that in case you get diarrhea from a bacterial infection or something along that line. You're having some real trouble. But the one, my favorite company is Pharmax, Pharmax. It comes out of England, and that's the only one that isolated theirs from a human being. Come find out we have receptors for it. They have electron micrographs of it lining the intestinal tract up to 200 cells deep. So that's how something found in the body at 1 times 10 to the 8th can protect you from something found 1 times 10 to the 14th, which is that bad bacteria going through the middle. And we don't have enough for the statistics yet. You know, you can look at all the research. There's lots of research to support every step of what we do. But nobody's put it together as a meal plan, so to speak, to watch and see what happens.
What was the don't get again for the fish oil?
An ethyl ester form. You want a triglyceride form. I also recommend vitamin D, 5,000 a day for everybody, every day. Adults, children, you just kind of graduate it on down. 1-year-old, give them 1,000 a day. You know, and they've got the little liquid stuff. If it's liquid, you only need half as much because it's if you put little drops on the tongue, it's twice as well absorbed. But 10,000 a day during flu season really help protect you. If you happen to get the flu, then you take 100,000 a day for 3 days. And it'll really reduce your symptoms.
Can I ask
and
a really sensitive question? What about flu shots?
Well, you know, there's so many aspects to flu shots here. What I would say is they don't work. Number one, they grossly inflate the numbers and the number of people that die from the flu. It's usually about 2,000 to 3,000 people a year. And they say it's 30,000 to 40,000 people a year. No, those people died of pneumonia that should have been treated with an antibiotic that was started by the flu. So if you want to call that flu, go ahead. I don't. I don't trust it at all. The first few people that came out, all the experts said the swine flu is a man-made virus. The man who created Tamiflu said it's a man-made virus. And now they just put it in our regular flu shots. So you're going to get it whether you wanted it or not. The World Health Organization is run by John D. Rockefeller, and I'll leave it at that.
So getting back to the supplements, did you also recommend COQ10?
I don't get into that unless there's a specific problem. Certainly if you're taking a statin drug and you feel, I remember I was going to tell you an incident where I think you should take a statin drug, okay? I think a statin drug is appropriate for somebody who has about a 95% blockage and they're not getting bypassed for that or whatever. Why? Because a certain percentage of that blockage is cholesterol in a liquefied form, and if you lower the cholesterol in the blood enough, it'll begin to pull that out of there, and you can open that up from a 95% to a 92%, and if you understand fluid dynamics, you really increase blood flow a lot. So, yeah. But I'd use CoQ10 for a lot of things. CoQ10, alpha-lipoic acid, and L-carnitine, vitamin E and C. That's a really good cocktail for the mitochondria, for example, to really improve energy, help you detoxify, that sort of thing.
What's a good cocktail for the mitochondria? Say it again.
Well, I'd say about 300 milligrams of CoQ10. I would say 1,000 milligrams of L-carnitine 2 to 3 times a day. Alpha-lipoic acid, about 200 milligrams 3 times a day. Vitamin C, about 2,000 to 3,000 milligrams a day. And vitamin E, about 800 milligrams a day, preferably mixed tocopherols.
And that's for what purpose? I don't think it got
Cleaning up the improving mitochondrial function. Mitochondria is what takes the food we eat and turns it into energy. They decline in number and functionality as we age, and that unfortunately is part of the aging process.
Some other questions?
Sir?
Yeah, and as I mentioned to you, what you say seems to fit a lot of what I've experienced and done in the past. And a lot of what you emphasized had to do with getting your primary diet from meat. Now, we're involved in future projection issues, and one of the big things that we see in the literature is that the amount of meat that's available for such a huge population is limited. And the idea of our population, when we're talking about 8 billion people now, being able to eat
Well, there's the
that much
problem.
meat is an issue from a how's it going to happen in the world.
Well, I think at some point we need to put our feet on the ground and recognize what the real problem is. The real problem is we could have a utopia here if we just have enough intelligence to start limiting population. They talk about how much it costs to raise a cow and all that energy. That's grain-fed livestock. I don't like grain-fed livestock. I like free-range beef, and that's what's in my freezer at home. I've got a 48-acre little ranchito in Wimberley, and it provides me about 600 pounds of beef a year. And that's almost enough. So, and it's not very productive land because it's pretty rocky stuff, But I think that there's ways to do this. You can grow chickens, you can grow worms, you can do all these different things. You can grow worms to feed your chickens. There's a lot of ways that people can do this on a small basis. And I'm not sure I believe all the statistics that we're told. I think that if people out in the hill country and out in the surrounding of the cities are the problem. If you got an acre, you can survive. And so I think from my perspective is a come to Jesus moment here on what we're going to do. Because you're either going to get all these diseases, because if you're not true to your genes, you're going to get in trouble. Maybe we'll figure out another way to do it or some way to kind of limp along here. I believe in technology, I believe in human beings, and I think we're very smart about that. I don't think we're very wise about it. And I would like to see a little wisdom added to this. That's just my opinion.
We have a question back here from Paul.
Sir?
Yeah, have you looked into complexity science with respect to how the body operates? Have you done any of that at all?
Complexity bias.
Complexity theory.
Complexity science.
Complexity science, I'm sorry.
I'm certainly not an expert in it. I'm studying complexity science on my own. But a couple of things have come out of the literature with respect to health that I suggest maybe you go and look at.
Thanks.
It fits in with your kind of philosophy. Generally, we take the heart, for example. we generally think that what we want is a regular heartbeat. As it turns out, that's the last thing you want, because your heart, a normal heart, beats chaotically. Its beats are not the same every time, and it's got a pattern of chaos. When it starts to beat regularly, you're about to die. And what do? We work like hell to get our heart to beat regularly.
Right.
Same thing with respect to breathing. The breathing is a chaotic. Your rate of breathing is chaotic.
Children demonstrate this very well. They'll lift an arm and their heart rate will go up.
Yeah.
If an internal medicine doctor was listening to a child's heart rate, they only treat, adults, they would think that the person has a cardiac arrhythmia when it's a normal, healthy, functioning child.
Exactly. Same thing with respect to breathing. What they've found is that with these artificial breathers that keep people alive when their lungs don't function right and everything, that it works much more effectively if they introduce chaotic behavior into the pumping as opposed to regular pumping.
Same is true with exercise. You really need to vary your exercise. The people that get out and run 5 miles every day lose lung capacity.
Okay. Same thing. You already think about it.
Guess I was.
Yeah.
Okay, one more question, and we'll shift toward talking about the future implications here.
Well, one of the things you mentioned at firstly was beans. What about plant proteins generally? Soy, beans, or perhaps a few others, and what about starches from things like potatoes, non-grain sources?
Well, I mentioned that bowl I told you, this nasty bowl that'll kill you if you eat enough of it raw. One of the ingredients there was potatoes and beans and grains. Okay, those aren't food. Those plants don't want their seed eaten. They put toxins in it. They're very nutrient depleted. They bind up our digestive enzymes, so you can't get the nutrition out of the more nutrient-dense foods that you may also have eaten during that same meal. There's nothing good about it. If you're going to a Burger King and you want to order there, I suggest you throw away both buns. You can have the pickles and the lettuce and the onions and and all the meat you want. And that'll last you longer in terms of satiety and energy than if you eat that bun. And so starches are overrated. You don't have to have starches at all. The body can you want to think about protein as time-released glucose. The liver will take protein, turn it into sugar for you all day long. Time-released. Work harder, makes more. That's how we're designed, okay? That's why we burn out our pancreas, because of all these carbohydrates.
When I did the Atkins diet, my husband and I first did that, people were criticizing me a lot, but what I found was that I started enjoying my fruits and I could taste them again.
Right.
Because before, when you had all the whites,
Pastas and stuff like that ruins your taste buds. It's got much more flavor.
I was like, this apple didn't taste.
There's a
as
bouquet
good.
of flavors there now that you
Right.
begin to rediscover.
I started-
If,
exactly.
if you go from Atkins to paleo, what you lose is dairy and the deli meats, but you gain fruits and nuts and vegetables. You know, now you can see why it's all the virtues.
And that's what you start craving for.
That's right. Yes, sir.
Just for the heck, just go to a restaurant like Carino's. They'll let you have spinach instead of pasta. And the trick is to get
Right.
more and more of the restaurants to know
Yes.
what those substitutes
Yeah, when
are.
I went to a breakup, and at the time they were serving spinach instead of the pasta, they were serving spinach for their lasagna dish. And it was so fresh and good, and then they stopped serving it.
Well, that's the thing, we need more people to say.
That's right.
So we have about 10 more minutes. Futurists sometimes say that there are several ways to look at the future. There are plausible futures, there are probable futures, and there are preferable futures. And then people like Ellen Kay said, the best way to forecast a future is to invent it. So one way of looking at what happened here tonight is a way to look at the future is to invent the future. And I think that's really what we've heard here in terms of what Dr. Sebring has talked about. But so what do you see as the main implications of this? What is the probable future related to what he said?
Same as you.
Well, not just relative what he says, because he said, he doesn't think, and I don't think, that people are going to buy a paleo diet anytime soon. There's too much inertia into doing things the way they are. But I think what we can anticipate in the next couple of years is a general collapse of the world economy. And that's going to confront us with a lot of painful choices. We've just come out with a Dole-Simpson plan for reforming government spending. Well, I've run the numbers. It's too little, too late by about 20 or 30 years. What's going to happen is to phase out Social Security, phase out Medicare, Medicaid, veterans care, child care, agricultural subsidies, government defense spending. We're essentially going to have to phase out about 80 or 90% of what government spends.
If the system stays together,
Yeah, if it stays
We
together.
also need to phase out all
there's
the fast food
possibilities for
So
collapse.
then, of course, that we're going to be faced with the thing is that if people are aware that there are alternatives, they'll be more receptive to them. But the world is not going to support eating a paleo diet at this point, not with the number of people we have. We can see in other countries where, you know, you see all these starving people walking around that are overweight. Well, how did they get to be starving and overweight? It's because their local economies can support a certain kind of food production which isn't good for them.
You don't have to go to other countries to see all those people.
Yeah.
Then there's also issues of
We've got a lot
internecine
of
warfare and
political
like that.
corruption and stuff.
Yeah.
I would disagree with some of that, leaving aside the collapse of the world economy, but, you know, what the campaign against tobacco tells us is that an educational campaign and a general realization that certain things are true can lead to a substantial change. Not a complete change, but it can lead to a substantial change. And it's not just this doctor that's talking about, you know, this kind of a diet. There's the Atkins diet, there's the South Beach diet, and this sort of stuff. So I think there's sort of a convergence on increasing, going back to a more sort of.
Yeah, the green movement's helping.
Yeah, but
that.
what
All
about
the fresh
this one,
market
our
that you
system?
see, the
Gonna keep
vegetable
that
markets.
education
that's-
from-
Lane, would you want to get in?
We had
Yeah, just one thing.
talk to us about watch out when the government and big business gets.
ADA on farm, big farm.
Yeah, I see that, but I think there still be a certain degree of change.
Yeah, so on one hand, you've got the power, including the power to influence government, the power of big business, okay, including big pharma, okay, big food industry,
Big help.
whatever. It's big business, and they're and influence on media. So like at least the mainstream kind of media and print media, because that media is consolidated and is influenced by the advertising of big business.
It's all for sale.
Yeah, it is. It's all for
It's
sale.
just
So
for
you're
sale.
not going to get investigative reporting that's neutral and challenges business. But on the other hand, a potentially balancing factor is the internet and discussion forums and the ability for people from a grassroots effort.
Having a video of a presentation like this
Yeah.
on our website
Yeah.
and on Vimeo and getting it out there.
Yeah.
There's a book called The Vegetarian Myth written by a gal that's, I just love her. She's so passionate, and she used to be vegetarian. But there's a statement in her book. She said, when mankind put the plow to the soil, he set forth the chain of events that will end in his ultimate demise.
Yeah, that you're on the point that I was about to make, because one of the most there's a lot of very interesting things in what you had to say. One of the most striking things was the thing about evolution itself, that we're not changing our genetic structure very much. A lot of other scientists have been thinking about that and studying it, and the kind of conclusion that some have come to is evolution is continuing outside of our bodies, that the evolutionary process that we're in has moved outside our bodies into the social structures and the thought patterns and everything that we're doing outside of our bodies. That leaves us with a really big problem, if that's true, because it says that the bodies we're in are going to be stuck back in some past time period, and we're developing intellectually far beyond that. And that really bothers me.
But one of the things I heard Dr. Sebring saying is that if we really take care of our genetic history in terms of the diet that we have, then we free ourselves up to mentally and emotionally be free to do all this other evolution that we're doing with social
I would
technology.
disagree with that. I would disagree with that because, you know, intellectually we've gone and we've created all kinds of new things, new toxins.
Yes.
New, you know, plastics. You know, what a great creation plastics was. That's the most toxic thing ever
Radio
created.
frequencies.
You know,
Right.
radio frequencies, Wi-Fi,
Right.
nuclear, energy, you know, chemotherapy, all radiation therapy, all of that. And literally we're inventing things to kill ourselves every day. Every day. And so I agree with Paul that we've taken the evolutionary battle outside of our bodies because now we're creating things that are causing problems and issues. That's why we have so many cancer rate, such a high cancer rate, you know, and high death rates from cancer.
Can I make one point about evolution here? That with the kind of population we have on Earth and the kind of mobility of breeding populations on Earth, evolution has probably come to an absolute stop in our case.
Yeah, it's basically what's happening.
In general, the larger the population, the slower the evolution.
Extinction's happening a lot faster than evolution.
Okay, yes, please.
I'd like to amplify a little bit in terms of what Wayne said. I see the future is one of great hope in this area. Number one, we have seen over the past decade consumers involved in e-learning to take control of information for themselves. They are no longer satisfied with traditional medical approaches. They're seeing others have different results. So the clients and patients we see today are much more informed. I think the thing that is going to change is when we can get this kind of information out to the public so that they can make their own decisions and take control of their own health. And I think that we have a population and an evolving population that is seeking to accomplish that. They are no longer satisfied with the results that they have seen for the past decade.
But actually, just to extend on that, the whole concept of journalism and what I said about investigative journalism and stuff. On one hand, you've got the consolidation of media that is for sale through advertising to the big corporate people who want to do us harm or whatever. But on the other hand, with things like cell phones, all of them having video cameras, we're seeing a huge rise in citizen journalism. We see a huge rise of nonprofits doing investigative research and bloggers. And now some of the blogging you get conversations going on that's not necessarily productive, but certain bloggers gain respect because people start seeing that what they're writing about makes a lot of sense, and they get a following. And there I see is where that's the balancing effect that the citizens can actually help with.
All right. Yes, on the back. Mm-hmm.
Well, from a teen's point of view, I think what we have to realize is that a lot of the times the future is kind of in our own hands, but most people assume that teenagers don't want to listen and that teenagers don't want to hear what they're told. But really all we do is really listen. I mean, most of the kids who have political opinions, it's what their parents have told them. And all we do is we listen to what other people say so that we can evaluate the rest of the world. And every teen that I have ever gone out to tell about what I hear here, or perhaps what I hear when I go to a documentary with my parents, everyone has gone home and they've looked it up, and then they wanted to listen to what these people have to say, and they're willing to internalize it, and they're willing to hear it because they haven't developed these prejudices or these biases that come with age. And if we could simply just have these teens that are listening and are willing to hear things, I feel like if they were just hearing the right things, then we could see these sort of changes happening. And if kids were hearing things like these presentations, you know, I know tons of kids who have changed their diets just because of what they've heard is bad for them. And I know a lot of kids who just disregard diet as a whole because they're told that it doesn't matter and that they're teens and that they can eat as they please. It's just something that we have to realize. You have to be able to speak to the youth if you want to see a change. And I feel like that's something we need to do.
But you all
Good,
have,
thank you.
You all also read a lot on the internet and stuff. You don't just chat to each other, because don't you also learn a lot about the world that way too?
Exactly.
Which we didn't have.
But it's, I love this, the comment,
Yeah.
because the teens and young people in general, because they don't have the biases, they're like sponges, and they're looking, they're experimental. You know, like in the 60s and 70s, they experimented with all sorts of drugs and things like that. But or they experiment with religions. They're really looking for the right pathway, and like you said, they want to see various different opinions. And I think your generation is the ideal one to see the groundswell from the citizen journalism, whatever, and balance that against a big corporation and make up your own mind, and then take the leadership role as you get into the workforce.
We just need more of you here.
Yeah,
But
however, I'll bet.
Thanks for
this
being
young
here.
lady is an AP student.
Yep.
And the problem is, what do we do for the lower 70% of the students? Most of whom are not that sharp.
One last comment?
I do think
okay.
that there is a very significant movement among particularly mothers today. I know that in my network of mothers through the years of growing, raising our kids, these women were from professional backgrounds and had a lot of education, and then had the experiences of touching upon traditional medicine for significant health issues, took it upon themselves to utilize the internet, researched everything, and I have friends that have a huge following, just personally, of people who respect their research, respect their interests because they've been through cancer treatment, and they now are looking at all the alternative medicine, looking at things from overseas, and sending out tons of documentation. So that network is very much alive out there, but it's alive within that stratus of our society. My concern is, while I do think that we're evolving and there's a lot more interest and knowledge amongst people who have a certain level of income and access to technology and understanding the level of information that's presented here tonight, once you start moving further down, and my background's in nursing also, so I've done case management in very poor populations. It's very hard when you start coming down to take what we had tonight and get it into that level and help them to internalize what that would mean to them and why it's so much overvalued. That's really the challenge.
Thank you.
The kids, like my daughter and her friends, they'll have access to that, and it will open the door, they'll get it. And if we continue to perpetuate what we learn from one another, then we'll also get it. And at that level, we will spread that information. But beyond that, which is a much larger percentage of the population, we really have a barrier that I don't really know how to overcome.
One last comment.
And that was, to feed on what you had said, that's my concern is taking the message to the masses. Because as healthcare costs increase and Medicaid looks at cuts, more people are switching over to high deductible insurance plans, which eliminates the health maintenance annual checkups. You know, how do you carry this message? Because for a lot of people that are on low fixed or very low incomes, or they're living off of food stamps, oftentimes it's cheaper for them to buy prepared foods.
Sure. Dollar menu.
Exactly. You know, so it's looking at co-ops or farming programs and introducing those into those areas to help build that.
It's 9:01, we're beyond our curfew. Just a reminder, on December 7th, we'll be continuing this conversation as well as having other conversations. And I need to ask you, if anybody would not like to have your image on the video, please let me know and we'll edit it out.
I'd just like to make one announcement. There's a fellow came to my clinic several years ago and was filming a documentary. At 28 years old, he dropped dead jogging right in front of EMS, was revived, wondered why he was having such trouble. His father died at a very young age of heart disease. Started looking around for a better way. Discovered the paleo diet. I think he's 50-something years old now. And he's been putting together a documentary called The Perfect Human Diet, PhD. And he's really struggling to get this thing put together, but he's been around the world. He's got beautiful footage, and it's just the final editing. If you ever want to contribute it, he's been to Australia with the Aborigines, he's been to South Africa, he's been to Germany, so some of the digs of Cro-Magnon finds there, etc. He's really done a beautiful job. The doctor Lauren Cordain, who wrote the Paleo Diet, he's walked with him out on the football field at Colorado State, interviewed. He interviewed lots of my patients. I was in it, but the main thing is, if you want to contribute at all to this guy, I think he's about 100,000 away from getting this thing. But it's a 3-hour documentary for PBS, and it's beautifully done from what I've seen.
All right. Well, thank you very much.
Thank you.
One thing Dr. Sebring didn't mention, if you had a website.
SebringClinic.com.
Okay.
SEBRING, looks like the car. SebringClinic.com.
All right. Thank you all very much.
How do I get this out of here?
Do you have an email that I can?
Okay, yeah.